Greetings everyone, this is First Centurion 753, starting a new series with Europa Universalis 4, and we're going to be playing this series as Portugal, and we're going to do a little alternative history in this series. Most of you are familiar with the story of Christopher Columbus, the Italian explorer who sailed for the country of Spain in 1492. If you're not familiar with that, I don't know where you've been living, but many of you are probably not familiar with the fact that Mr. Columbus actually went to Portugal first, and he proposed to sail west for the court of the King of Portugal. But Portugal had already had their own ambitions. In 1417, a Portuguese prince by the name of Henry established a school of navigation. And if you've played Portugal before, you'll know that the first Portuguese idea is the legacy of the navigator. Henry the Navigator was his name. He was the third son of John I of Portugal, and his idea was to sail south and sail around Africa. He didn't know how big Africa was, but he was hoping that they could sail around it into the Indian Ocean and get to India and reach India and the Indies, which also included China in these areas. He wanted to reach them directly because from these areas were coming all types of silks and spices and things that were in very high demand in Europe in the 15th century. Okay, and they were coming to Europe via the Silk Road, which had been originally traveled by Marco Polo, a Venetian, or they were coming through Europe through the Persian Gulf, the Middle East, or through the Red Sea and Egypt. And the Venetians and the other Italians had a monopoly on this trade from Egypt and Arabia. Okay, and so they would sell to the rest of the Europeans. So there's a lot of middlemen along the road here. Okay, Portugal wanted a direct route, wanted to cut these off and go directly. Okay, so what Henry did was he established a school of navigation to sail south, and the explorers in the school would study different navigation skills. They would study astronomy, mathematics, probably highly influenced by the Muslims in North Africa, or Muslims that were actually in Spain at the time, because the Iberian Peninsula had been conquered by the Muslims in, I think, like the 6th or 7th century AD. Muslims had actually moved into France, where the Moors were defeated at the Battle of Tours, if you remember from your history class, by Charles the Hammer Martel, the Frankish king. And after that, centuries of warfare would ensue along the Iberian Peninsula between the Catholics or Christians and the Muslims, and eventually they would be driven out. Granada is the last Muslim stronghold in the 1400s. They will eventually be conquered by Castile, which will then marry Aragon and unite. The conquest of Granada, I believe, unites the two kingdoms. Now, we might not be able to prevent the conquest of Granada, but hopefully we'll be able to prevent the unification of the two kingdoms, if we can. But we are going to try to follow a historical path, and we are going to go south with our exploration, but we're going to make one alternate change in this history timeline, and we are going to accept Columbus's proposal to sail west. Okay, his plan was to go west, across the ocean, and eventually reach India directly. But he didn't realize that this big thing was here, the North and South American continents. He didn't realize these were here. He thought that you could keep going and sail directly to China. That was his plan. Alright? And based on his predictions on how big the world was, he thought that China was actually right here. He was looking at the estimates of an Egyptian astronomer from 1st, 2nd century AD by the name of Ptolemy, I believe, and not one of the Ptolemy kings, but named after them. And Ptolemy's estimates for the size of the world were much smaller than they actually were. Most of the people in the world did not think the world was flat. They didn't think Earth was flat. They thought it was round. They knew it was round. And if you watch the movie 1492, Conquest of Paradise, which is about Columbus, the opening scene is Columbus and his son sitting on the coast and watching a ship sink below the horizon. And the fact that the ship sunk below the horizon told people that the world wasn't flat. There were certain natural things, that you could see in life that told you that the world was not flat. So they knew the world wasn't flat. The debate was how big the world actually was. Ptolemy thought it was much smaller than it was. Columbus was using Ptolemy's maps. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, in the 3rd century BC, you guys know Aristotle, mentor to Alexander, protege of Plato and Socrates, was Socrates' protege. He actually had a much closer estimate, which is shocking. That 2,300 years ago, you could kind of predict how big the world was without telescopes or satellites or anything that we use today. So, but Columbus didn't go with Aristotle, he went with Ptolemy, and that prediction was wrong. So, the Portuguese were actually right from their vantage points to reject Columbus's idea. It was far too risky, and they were focusing more on they had the right idea. Because once they established that trade with India directly, and those historians or good history students out there know that Vasco da Gama had landed in India in 1496, and that established a direct trade route with them. And that voyage actually brought back a profit that was 5 times the initial cost of the voyage. So it was a huge 500% profit. It was huge. And eventually Portugal will move into the Indian Ocean. They'll establish colonies in India, and they'll cut off these sea lanes, and they'll dominate the trade with the Indies. The Venetians at one point actually are proposing a Suez Canal, like 400 years before the Suez Canal was built. So that's pretty interesting. So, but we're going to take the alternative route, and we're going to say in 1485 that when Columbus comes to Portugal and proposes a western voyage, we're going to take about a year to consider it, and in 1486 we will grant Columbus a charter or whatever to sail west across the ocean and use these southeast trade winds, which he also thought by using the southeast trade winds he'd be able to get there a lot quicker. And the Portuguese knew about these different trade winds too. It was interesting because as you go north and south along latitude lines, the prevailing winds sort of switch. Alright, right around here you have a group of wind called the prevailing westerlies, and those are the winds that we receive in eastern United States. That's why storms generally come in from the east, unless there's something weird going on with the jet stream or a hurricane. Usually our storms will come in from the east, or coming from out of the west. And those are because of the prevailing westerlies. So if you actually reach the Azores, which are Portuguese islands here, you know that you can go directly east because these prevailing westerly winds coming out of the west will bring you across that ocean pretty quickly. When you get down to Madeira or these Cape Verde Islands or the Canary Islands, now you're in the northeast trade winds, where the winds are coming out of the northeast, and those will push your vessel west across the ocean. And that's what Columbus was sort of counting on. So it was part of his plan. So we're going to go ahead and accept that mission while continuing to go south. We're going to diversify. Instead of just focusing on southern voyages, we're going to diversify, which any good investor would do. Okay, we have to come up with a name for our game, because we're going to be playing Iron Man mode. I haven't played Iron Man mode with Portugal yet. We're going to call it Portuguese Trade Winds. It's a cool name, right? And it's going to be on the cloud. I already have Portuguese Trade Winds that I started. And we're going to go ahead and play. Okay, so basically this video is just going to be more of a historical background video, which I've gone over, and we'll talk about some initial strategies, but I don't think we're actually going to start playing until the second video. So this is Spain, or Portugal, what Portugal controls at the time, and they also have a province down here in North Africa. It's called Ceuta, whatever that is. If you watch other videos about Portugal, most of them will tell you to just sell this province right off the bat. We're going to follow history for the most part. And in Portuguese history, they actually do conquer this area called Tangiers, which is right here. Tangiers. This province. And this province actually is pretty important because it's a coastal center of trade, which means that, you know, we're going to get some extra trade power in that Seville trade node right there. We might actually be able to surpass Castile for the dominance of that trade node. But we can't declare war right away because we are actually a 12-year-old. Alright? The king is a 12-year-old, and we have a regent council running the country. So we're not going to go for that mission right off the bat. Instead, we're going to try to solidify papal relations, because as a Catholic country, you get all these nice little bonuses if you have more papal influence, and we're going to try to go for some of those. So, for diplomacy, we have to call out some rivals here. We're not going to call out Castile. We're going to go after the Muslims, because we are Christian. And we're going to try to ally ourselves with Castile and Aragon, which I think you can actually do. I think you can actually ally with both of them right off the bat. Nice. Okay. And nice. Good. And then go for the Pope. And we're going to try to bring him in as an ally as well, but we can't do that just yet. Instead, we're going to have to improve relations, which works well with our mission. And that's our diplomacy to start. Okay, so I haven't played an Iron Man mode, really. I did like a quick sample Iron Man mode, which really actually kind of screwed up on. So I started over right away. And I did play a non-Iron Man playthrough for about the first couple decades with Portugal, so I do have kind of like a early, you know, play script right here. But after we get past the first couple decades, I do not necessarily know what I'm doing. So, if anyone has any suggestions, comments, or anything, please post them below. Here are the light ships that we are going to use to protect our trade out of Seville. And I am going to separate the other fleet. The early Carracks are going to go to Madeira, and they're going to actually start exploration, because if you notice here, I have to give them an explorer. Diogo Gomez. There are two extra things. I'm playing with the El Dorado DLC, and with the El Dorado DLC, they allow you to go on exploration missions, as well as to hunt for pirates. And I can hunt for pirates on a lot of different nodes here, but I'm going to go for exploration first. Exploring the coast of Safi, or exploring the Ivory Coast. Safi is this trade node right here, which will, there you go. That'll give us an idea of what's going on in this part of North Africa. And also, I think we'll reveal the, these are the Cape Verde Islands, which I think are controlled by Spain to start, but at least it will reveal them, because right now they're terra incognita. Okay, so we're going to sail this down to Madeira to establish a base there, and you're going to go on several different exploration missions from there. Safi and Ivory Coast. We can't circumnavigate the globe until technology level 9. The cogs, transport ships, will link up with our infantry, and we'll eventually send them over there to prepare for the Moroccan War, but that's not going to happen until our ruler can gain complete control. There are some Moroccan separatists, but it's 32 years until they will revolt, so we got time with that, plenty of time with that. And economically, if we're not going to be fighting a war for a while, we're going to reduce the army maintenance all the way down, and I don't think we need to have this fort right here. We can mothball that fort. And those are going to be the early strategies. As far as advisors are concerned, we're doing pretty well with administrative power and diplomatic power, but military power is weak. So I think I'm going to go ahead with this. Oh no, I can't use too much. What the heck was that? Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and recruit. I can't recruit him because the morale of the armies, it costs too much. Morale of the armies would be nice, but discipline's good. So we're going to go ahead and recruit this advisor to help us out. And those are the initial moves. We are going to go ahead and start this thing probably next episode. So I'm going to end this episode here. Hope you enjoyed. Please do subscribe to the channel if you have. Again, if you have comments about strategy, like I haven't played this scenario before really. So if you have strategy comments, I'll address them. If you have historical insights, I'd love to hear that. Any questions about anything, please post them below. And we are going to try to follow history somewhat, except for that one alteration of accepting Columbus's voyage. And we're going to see what happens when Portugal explores the Americas. Thank you for watching. Have a nice night.